Welcome to Chapter 8 about resource management. Today we're going to talk about two really cool topics. One is Hetch Hetchy and the other are sage grouse. And then we're going to learn some terms that hopefully we understand and help us understand about the environmental movement that occurred due to Hetch Hetchy. Okay, here we go. Okay. In San Francisco, there are a lot of earthquakes. And in 1906, there was a major one that caused some fires downtown. And the mayor of San Francisco kind of thought to himself, we need more water. We need water in San Francisco. So this was the proposal, the Hetch Hetchy Reservoir, and creating some aqueducts to bring water from Yosemite off the Tuolumne River into San Francisco to have a water reserve in case another earthquake, another fire, or natural disaster occurred. There was many other choices that the mayor had. However, this is just the one he chose to navigate. This is a very controversial topic. However, in my mind, the outcome is almost better than if they had won. And you will see why. So we're going to look at a bunch of photos of the valley, and I want you to think about, like, do you want to preserve it or do you want to conserve it? And preservation is like no one gets to touch it, not even John Muir. And conservation is using it wisely. And so on the left is pre-dam, on the right is post-dam. Again, on the left is pre-dam, right is post-dam. You can pause if you want to look at these longer. And this one is my favorite, mostly because you can actually see a huge difference and you have a man-made object kind of stuck in the front of this photo that's kind of saying like, hey, I'm ugly, I'm doing some harm, and it's not very pretty and aesthetic. Before the dam was built, John Muir took people into the Hetch Hetchy Valley to have their one last hike or experience. And John Muir died after this controversy, and people say that John Muir died of a broken heart because he lost the Yosemite Valley. Now, realizing the Yosemite is a big place, there's other places to look at, but this valley that has the Tuolumne Meadows and the Tuolumne River is just really special. Yosemite itself is special, but this area, just for John Muir, had a really soft spot in his heart. And people say often that he died from a broken heart because he lost. However, if he had stayed around longer, he might have realized it wasn't a complete loss. And the name of the dam is called the O'Shaughnessy Dam. And so that was put in. So John Muir, the preservationist, believed that nature should be saved, protected, not interfered with, not touched. His background is that he was a biologist. And there are some funny stories of his upbringing of him, just always saying quiz me, I'm a biologist, I know a lot. So yeah, he's kind of a funny person. And then Gifford Pinchot is the father of conservation. He was superintendent of the national forests, and he believed that it's just wise use that needs to be done with resources and the earth, and that we live on it. Let's conserve it. Let's not abuse it, but let's enjoy it. However, once this dam was built and this was gone forever, there was a pretty big environmental movement that occurred, and this kind of was the spark. So often there is a good to a bad, like the silver lining. And because Hetch Hetchy was lost, this valley, any other dam that was proposed after the O'Shaughnessy Dam was pretty much not built. In Dinosaur National Monument, there was a bunch of proposals. There was a bunch of proposals in California and Oregon and Washington. And they kind of used Hetch Hetchy as an example to say, look, don't do what we did here. Look what was lost. So although Hetch Hetchy is gone, it probably saved thousands, if not hundreds of other landscapes from being destroyed. And that's the part that John Muir didn't get to see. Great. So that's Hetch Hetchy. It's something you should know, those words. And we're going to move on to talk about the sage grouse of Wyoming. So they're an indicator species, and indicator species have like three meanings, or three distinct meanings. So they're a species or a group of species that reflect about the environmental state of the land. So like, how's that overall land doing? Second, indicator species are really affected by long-term and short-term environmental change. And three, when looking at the diversity of them, you can realize whether the population is really good. So this is the beautiful sage grouse, and I will talk a little bit about the sage grouse in general because they're kind of cool. Okay, so they live in the desert, and 2/3 of Wyoming is high desert. And so on the left, you will see this picture of sagebrush. And although it does not look scrumptious or yummy to us, this is literally the primary diet of the sage grouse. So during the winter, they eat it. And then in the summer, you can look, if you look real close, the edges have some green stuff on them. And that's their primary source. The other thing that sage grouse use the sage for is nesting and raising their young. So without sage, it would just be a grouse. But also, it wouldn't be able to survive. So they really depend, the sage grouse really depend on the sage, and that's why it's an indicator species of an overall landscape. Now, what's fun about this is on the right, I tried to get some really good photos. I believe I have a video. If it's not in the slideshow, I will upload it separately. But their breeding is very interesting. And so they go to an area called a lek. And a lek is just an area of sage that they have determined as like, this is the breeding ground. And so the male struts around and makes noise and makes himself pretty. And then the women, the ladies, it's a lady's choice. They kind of pick out the sage grouse that they're wanting to breed with. There's usually one or two dominant males. They have the highest breeding rate. And the young males are kind of pushed away. And because the lek is a really specific place, they come back to this area to breed over and over again. It's kind of like, you might say, like a bar. So the bar is where people meet, and they go there, and the men kind of show their stuff, and the women are like, oh, this is the one I want. And then they raise their children in the sage grass near the lek. So in mid-March, coming up, mid-March to mid-June is when all the babies occur, or all the mating occurs, sorry, a mating. And so the thing about sage is it needs water to grow, not a lot. And then the other thing about it being a nesting area is that on the sage are insects. So the insects become really important for specifically the young. Now in Wyoming, they are a game bird. Oh yeah, this is good. This is the sage grouse area, and it's a little hard to see, but on the right side, you'll see how dense Wyoming is and kind of where we are. The yellow, on the slide on the yellow is 75% breeding, and then blue is 100 and red is 25%. So the on the chart, the color closest to the ground is the higher breeding area. They are hunted, as I mentioned, so they are a game bird. They live long lives, but they have low reproduction rates. So because of this, as an indicator species, they're affected more by damage to the landscape. So as we damage landscape, this animal shows us kind of the longevity of that. In Wyoming alone, about half the habitat has been disturbed. And that decline is due to human activity. Part of it is the quality of the land that exists and the sage is being destroyed. And then the other half is that the population's being gone. Drought and fire really affect the sage grouse. And according to researchers, we have been in a drought since 1999. And I'd like you to take a guess about what other problem in Wyoming impacts the sage grouse. So pause the video, maybe think about it. Great. So oil, gas, and coal. These things really impact the range. We will talk about perhaps they're incompatible, but in the areas of oil and gas, 84% of the sage grouse areas are outside oil and gas areas, but 35% are inside oil, gas, and coal habitat. So the good habitat overlaps with the energy habitat, or like what's good for energy and oil and coal. The only other thing that has affected the sage grouse in Wyoming specifically is the West Nile virus. And this is from researchers from the University of Wyoming that have done this research. And they learned that about 6 to 9% of sage grouse are lost due to the West Nile virus. If they get it, they will die. The reason they're getting West Nile is because the parents that are sage grouse parents, they need to raise their young near water or ponds so that they have water. And that's a breeding ground for mosquitoes. So, they need the water, yet the things that are attracted to the water are killing them. And then they do have a few predators. Golden eagles and ground squirrels are the most. And the ground squirrels eat the eggs. There have been some rare cases of elk eating the sage grouse baby eggs. So there is a big project being done by the University of Wyoming to look at the sage grouse, monitor them, and I think this is kind of interesting and cool to know that one species can tell us a lot about our landscape and our health of it. Okay, so managing wildlife or managing an ecosystem almost considers itself contradictory. So we want to manage something that's natural, and we want nature to run its course. What Dale Robertson decided was the definition of ecosystem management has 4 kind of ideas. One is that there's diversity in the landscape. Second is that it's healthy. And third is it's productive. And fourth, it has a sustainable ecosystem. Now, diverse is probably easy to measure because you can count the types of animals, plants, insects, and see if they're high or low. Health and productivity almost are based a little bit subjective. As we know, some ecosystems just go through phases of being healthy and not. And sustainable, meaning that it will last for a long time. So I think diverse and sustainable kind of cover the two in the middle, because an ecosystem may go through different changes like wildfire, and that wildfire may help the productivity and the sustainability. Ecosystem management, we need to think about 4 different factors for ecosystem management. And humans are part of the ecosystem. And we need to be able to have humans in an ecosystem in a holistic way. So there's social management, physical, economical, and biological. These are some of the core principles when it comes down to kind of what this looks like. So systems thinking is, so I'll just read them and then we'll go through them. Systems thinking, ecological boundaries, ecological integrity, data collection, monitoring, adaptive management, interagency cooperation, organizational change, human in nature, and values. So systems thinking is that word that I said before, which is holistic. So conserving multiple species and having that biological diversity, not focusing on just saving one item. So if we went back and looked at the sage grouse, we could save it, but our systems thinking need to be about saving the sage grouse, the golden eagle, the ground squirrels, and all of the things that go with it. Ecological boundaries. These are the boundaries that are clear and defined. And often this is based on mountain ranges, rivers, and features. So if you think about when we drive up to Pinedale and get to like the Wind Rivers, there's an obvious boundary that occurs, somewhere between the Southwest state and that mountain range. And that would be an ecological boundary because like the climate is different. Ecological integrity is managing focused on biodiversity and all the other processes that are out there that sustain animals and plants to be resilient. So kind of what can we do to boost things up? Data collection is a huge part of ecological management. So we need to be able to get into these places, collect data, analyze the data, and then do something with it. So a couple examples are species diversity, habitat type, and just, and collecting raw data to look at. Monitoring, this is what a lot of government agencies are doing, data collection and monitoring. And sometimes when you go out to the land, you will see one of these monitors out there and that has usually a little tag on it that says like, please don't touch. So being able to track things, allow for outcomes naturally and let them be evaluated and modified. And so sometimes people monitor, but they don't do anything with it. And we need to do something with it, even if that something is making the choice to do nothing. Adaptive management is the fact that we're not always going to do the same thing every time. So gaining knowledge from the scientists and realizing like, hey, this might work here, this might not work here, and having a very interdisciplinary management plan. Interagent cooperation. Sometimes, BLM, Forest Service, public all need to work together. And especially when animals do not understand boundaries. So an animal might go outside its boundary into like a private ranch, and then we need folks to work with government agencies and private agencies and stuff to collect data, monitor, or change habitat. Organizational change. This is the fact that these land management agencies need to realize that they may need to shift their structure to do something that benefits, a species or an area. Human in nature, we are linked to all of the management plans. So we maybe hunt sage grouse, we go backpacking in the Wind Rivers, and we are part of that balance. And then value is humans play a key role in guiding the management, and we also need to think about not just the social value, but prioritizing what other things are important. So this is a lot. I'll upload the PowerPoint for you, and some of these notes are in the notes of the slide. But managing anything in the outdoors is not a simple fix. It is a constant ebb and flow. Okay. Non-renewable resources versus renewable. Renewable are things that regenerate, and non-renewable are not. So once we use up a resource, we're done with it. And so in Wyoming, you could argue that some of the places that we have our extracted coal or trona, like, are they renewable? And if they're not, when the company is done mining or drilling or extracting, what is that land going to look like? Hopefully they're going to do some restoration. That's often a huge part of managing. I wanted to throw this in. This is the Multiple Use Act of 1960. And this is the fact that we need to manage our renewable surfaces, all of them, so they're utilized in combination, which best needs all people's ideas. So one person might want to log timber, and one person might want to hike in the timber. And so the Multiple Use Act says that we need to manage them all. Sustainable yield. This is just part of the act. So I'll just read it to you. The achievement and maintenance in perpetuity of a high level, annual, or regular periodic outcome of variable renewable resources of the natural forces without impairment of the productivity of the land. So those renewable resources can't damage the productivity of the land. Okay, something that maybe is more recreational than management is dispersed camping. This is something to think about. Dispersed camping, there's 3 other words people often use: boondocking, dry camping, or off-the-grid camping. And this is an interesting idea. This is, instead of having designated campsites, we're saying, hey, spread out. So more damage is spread over a big area, and areas have the chance to regenerate and get better. Some people will argue that this does more damage. I just don't think there's been enough research about this. Now, the reason this might work in Wyoming compared to any other place is the lack of people that are going camping and off the grid in the Wyoming desert. And so this is not as common in areas that are very compact. The 2 places that I've seen a lot of dispersed camping are Wyoming and Arizona. You go to somewhere like Colorado, there's actually very limited dispersed camping, and when it is, it's designated sites, even though it's dispersed, and it's all in national forest. So this is actually a picture of Arizona and their national forest, and kind of what this Coconino National Forest uses to educate people. And there needs to be some education about leave no trace, packing out trash, packing out poop. I think some areas just get used and abused, and other areas barely get used. And that's why people don't notice the impact. This is a map of just all the land in Wyoming and kind of who owns it. And you will see that most of it is in the northwest corner. So there's a lot of land that's just like vacant. And if you look at the look here button, you can get a link to some more information. So people go to these places because they're quiet, they're less crowded, there's less conflict, and you actually might see wildlife. Incompatibility. So this is a hot topic right now in Wyoming, but this is the fact that 2 pieces of land cannot be used always together for different purposes. So sometimes we label something as incompatible, and meaning like two types of people cannot use it. An example would be like you have someone logging and someone wants to backpack. So someone decides what the land is for. It's either only for backpacking or only for logging. And this is, in my mind, what's happening with the BLM right now. The oil and gas want to be able to use BLM, which is a multi-use area. And someone is putting up a management plan saying, hey, we're not going to make this multi-use. So this is a huge controversy, bigger than this PowerPoint. And I would encourage you to read some articles about this. But the three things that we need to think about when something is incompatible is biology, psychology, and safety. So from a biological standpoint, can the ecology stand either option? And so if you have a piece of land, we'll go back to the original example where people are recreating or logging, can the biology handle one or the other? And ecology. The other thing is psychological. Are people satisfied? So if you take some prime piece of real estate and get rid of it and give it to a mining company, then you are losing the public opinion. So users are not happy. And third is safety. This is mostly about people and animals. By doing whatever is being done on the land for that one use, will people be safe still? And safety should trump most anything else. Carrying capacity, this is a common word used in many realms of the outdoors or land or management. But this is the fact that there's only a maximum number of specific individuals, a species that can exist in a habitat without threatening other species. And so I think in Wyoming, the one thing that you could relate to is cows and fields. So if you were a rancher in Wyoming, you might understand that I need X amount of acreage for each cow. And so when it comes to wilderness, we need to think about the same thing. Like, how much sage does a sage grouse need? So that they're not threatened by the golden eagle or squirrel. And so carrying capacity and indicator species are two kind of key points here, that if you figure out the carrying capacity or understand what each animal needs, you can better manage the land for them. These are some methods for improving or controlling carrying capacity. So one, durability of the vegetation, and how we would do this is water or fertilize. So if there was an area that was being damaged, would it help to water or fertilize that area? Educational programs, this is mostly about putting up signage, changing visitor behavior. So if you have an area that's a lek for the sage grouse, you're trying to protect it, putting up signage saying, hey, don't go close. And because they use the same areas often, this may be reasonable. Improving pathways, this is going to help by reducing damage to the land, but creating one path to something instead of multiple paths. Distributing the load to land. This is like collecting user fees, having directional signs, putting in regulations. But this helps offload damage to the land. And then zoning, this is so that each user group has a specific area that they won't conflict. So you might have an area that's only for snowmobilers, or you might have an area that's only for skiers, or hey, this area can be hunted year round. And that is the end. So just to recap, we talked about Hetch Hetchy and the big controversy and how even though they lost the Yosemite Valley, they saved so many other pieces of land. the sage grouse of Wyoming as indicator species, and some other terms about renewable resources, carrying capacity, disperse use, and incompatible resources. I hope this was fun. I hope you get out and see some sage grouse this spring.